Hey everyone, I'm Joshua Orro, the Mustang Prince, and welcome to Mustang Prince Orro Reports. In my last video, I shared my thoughts on Thor's 2011 debut film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which was the very first movie from that franchise that I ever saw in theaters. And while it was a pretty good start for the Norse god of thunder, I also thought his adopted brother Loki was a very sympathetic villain. But after getting defeated by Thor, it wasn't over for the mischievous trickster god, because in 2012, after Thor's and a few other heroes' solo films, Marvel Studios gave us a movie that was the very first assemblage of an epic superhero team. Released on May 4th, 2012, the movie is The Avengers. Now, on for the plot of the movie. S.H.I.E.L.D. has located the mysterious Tesseract device, which is actually a gateway into an entirely new world. A mysterious being known as Loki arrives on Earth and immediately assumes that he can rule over all human beings. But that irks S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury the wrong way. As Loki escapes with the Tesseract, Nick Fury believes that this is an act of war against Earth. His only hope is to assemble an actual team of superheroes, Dr. Bruce Banner, who turns into an enormous green rage monster known as the Hulk, Tony Stark in his venerable Iron Man armor, Captain America, the Stark Enterprises created super soldier, Thor, the god of thunder, and master assassins Hawkeye and Natasha Romanoff. Together, they will become a team to take on an attack that will call them to become the greatest of all time. So, what are my personal thoughts on this movie? Well, despite the fact that I never saw this movie in theaters, I thought this movie was absolutely amazing. Not only was this one of the best films of 2012, but it's also one of the most important movies in the MCU Infinity Saga. And to further explain why I love this movie, let's move on to Mustang notes. The film's development began when Marvel Studios received a loan from Merrill Lynch in April 2005. After the success of Iron Man in May 2008, Marvel announced that the Avengers would be released in July 2011 and would bring together all the heroes from Marvel's previous movies. Joss Whedon was brought on board in April 2010 and rewrote the original screenplay by Zach Penn. Production began in April 2011 in Albuquerque, New Mexico, before moving to Cleveland, Ohio in August and New York City in September. The film included more than 2,200 visual effects shots, and it was converted to 3D in post-production. Now, like I said earlier, I really mean that I really missed out on seeing the movie when it was released in theaters, and I felt really ashamed, especially after hearing what my friends and every other reviewer said about it. And after finally watching it on Blu-ray, I realized that The Avengers was one of the biggest films of the 2010 decade. Plus, it was one of the highest grossing films ever, and it was also the very first Marvel movie distributed by Walt Disney Studios. Plus, I've heard rumors that this movie influenced Disney to make an Avengers-like animated TV series set in the Lion King universe known as The Lion Guard. But that's a topic for another time. Maybe next year. Anyway, I think this film has a very epic story, thrilling and badass action sequences, and interesting hero connectivity. Plus, I think the top secret S.H.I.E.L.D. facility, known as the Joint Dark Energy Mission Facility, where Project Pegasus was being worked on, and the S.H.I.E.L.D. airship, known as the Helicarrier, are really breathtaking. And of course, out of all the battle scenes in this movie, the battle in New York is the most memorable. But at the same time, this is one of 3 battles in the MCU that led into the United Nations passing the Sokovia Accords 4 years later. Another thing in this movie that made it pretty interesting is that it features two Infinity Stones. First is the Tesseract, which holds the Space Stone, which has the ability to teleport, predate the universe by creating wormholes, and it possesses unlimited energy. Now, from what I can tell, the Tesseract has had the most appearances in the MCU Infinity Saga. However, prior to this movie, it was first seen in 1942 being used by Hydra's leader, Johann Schmidt, aka Red Skull, in order to power enhanced weaponry in order to defeat the Allies during World War II, until he was defeated by Captain America. Not long afterwards, Tony's father, Howard Stark, recovered the Tesseract out of the Arctic Ocean and kept it at Camp Lehi until 1970 and relinquished custody over it in the 1980s. Later, undercover Kree scientist Wendy Lawson, aka Mar-Vell, harnessed the Tesseract's power to create light-speed engines in order to assist the Skrulls in their war against the Kree, and they took possession of the Tesseract, storing it in her laboratory in orbit. In 1995, during the events of Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers recovered the Tesseract from Lawson's laboratory and renounced custody of it to S.H.I.E.L.D. The second is the Scepter, which holds the Mind Stone, which has the ability to fire energy projectile blasts, perform astral projection, allow mental communication, and dominate the minds of others on contact, placing them under the control of the wielder and loyal to their commands indefinitely. But thankfully, people who are put under the stone's control will often regain their individuality after receiving a significant blow to the head. Now, there's not too much history regarding the Scepter, but all I can say is that before Loki had it, it used to be in the possession of the Mad Titan Thanos, whom 6 years later disintegrated half of all life in the universe. But later, this stone would get a bigger role in the second Avengers movie, Age of Ultron. Anyway, let's move on to the cast. Let's start with Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, played by Robert Downey Jr., whom I remember from Tropic Thunder, Sherlock Holmes, and that terrible 2020 Doolittle movie. Tony is a self-described genius, billionaire, playboy, and philanthropist with an electromechanical suit of armor of his own invention. Now, it's really hard to believe that Iron Man was the very hero who began the Marvel Cinematic Universe back in 2008, and in my opinion, while I like that Tony is a highly intelligent man and his inventions are really amazing, I don't really like him as much as the other Avengers in this movie. Like a lot of the characters that Robert Downey Jr. plays, Tony can be a real jerk at times. And he has drug problems. But you can't at least have a little bit of sympathy for Tony, mainly due to him trying to make up for all the evils committed with Stark Industries technology. Also, he's been going through a lot during his past two solo movies, like being kidnapped by the Ten Rings in Afghanistan, his former business partner Obadiah Stane turning against him, competing against Justin Hammer, and being challenged by Ivan Vanko. Also, after blogging Civil War back in 2017, I think the moments where Tony and Steve bicker with each other really get on my nerves. Next up is Bruce Banner, aka the Incredible Hulk, played by Mark Ruffalo, whom has been in 13 going on 30, Where the Wild Things Are, and Date Night. Bruce is a genius scientist who, because of exposure to gamma radiation, transforms into a monster when he's enraged or agitated. Now, it's been about 4 months since I blogged the Incredible Hulk movie, and some folks do point out that it's kind of distracting that Bruce is played by a different actor, but still, I agree that Mark Ruffalo is the best Hulk by far, despite the fact that Hulk is the most underused hero in the Infinity Saga next to, well, spoilers for another episode. Anyway, I think Bruce is another highly intelligent person, and I like that he's been providing medical assistance to the poor people in India. Plus, aside from his anger, I think his Hulk abilities are really incredible, with high jumps, superhuman strength, and agility. And I also like the part where he saves Tony by roaring, and the part where he tosses Loki around like a rag doll was really hilarious. Puny god. Also, I'm really looking forward to watching his cousin Jennifer's upcoming Disney Plus miniseries next month. Next we come to Steve Rogers, aka Captain America, played by Chris Evans, whom I remember as the Human Torch from the original Fantastic Four movies, TMNT, and just recently, Pixar's big screen return, Lightyear, which I saw at the El Capitan Theater a couple weeks ago. Captain Rogers is not only the very first Avenger, but he's also a World War II veteran who was enhanced to the peak of human physicality by an experimental serum, and he was frozen in suspended animation before waking up 70 years later in the modern world. To me, while he's doing his best adapting to living in the modern day time period, I think Steve is a real patriotic superhero, and as a former Eagle Scout of Troop 604, I really salute and look up to Steve as a true hero and a born leader, especially during the Chitauri invasion in New York. Also, I find it interesting that Steve has a very personal history with the Tesseract due to Red Skull using it during World War II. Also, I think Steve's shield is the kind of weapon that I can really picture Goofy using in a future Kingdom Hearts game. Next we have Thor, the Norse god of thunder and Prince of Asgard, played again by Chris Hemsworth, whom was in the 2009 Star Trek reboot, 2015's Vacation, and the 2016 Ghostbusters reboot. In this movie, after hearing that Loki survived a fall through a black hole, Thor was sent to Earth to retrieve him. In my eyes, I think Thor has become a lot more likable here compared to how he was in his 2011 movie. Despite that his first encounter with Tony Stark and Steve Rogers didn't start out great, I still believe that Thor makes a great ally to the Avengers, especially with his amazing thunder powers. Also, after taking Loki into custody, Thor took the Tesseract back to Asgard, not only for safekeeping, but to also rebuild the Rainbow Bridge. Our next character is Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow, played by Scarlett Johansson, whom was in 2014's Lucy, the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, Illumination's Sing, the 2016 Jungle Book remake, 2017's Ghost in the Shell, and Wes Anderson's Isle of Dogs. Now, it's been about a year since I blogged Nat's solo movie, which took place after Civil War, and as I said during that video, Nat made her MCU debut in Iron Man 2, and I still believe that Nat is a tough-as-nails, no-nonsense, and badass superheroine and spy. Plus, I think Nat can also be very cunning and intelligent and very unpredictable. One of my favorite scenes involving Nat is when she beats Georgy Lunkov while being restrained to a chair, and the part where she tells Loki about her past before joining S.H.I.E.L.D. The last member of the Avengers team is Clint Barnes, aka Hawkeye, played by Jeremy Renner, whom was in Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters and Arctic Dogs. In my eyes, Clint is an extremely skilled marksman and a master archer. Now, as I previously stated, Clint made his MCU debut in Thor, and he was the one who recruited Natasha into S.H.I.E.L.D. However, in this movie, Clint has been assigned by Nick Fury to watch over the Tesseract. Unfortunately, he becomes one of several victims who get brainwashed by Loki. However, following their attack on the helicarrier, Clint was freed from Loki's mental controls when Natasha slammed his head onto a steel pipe. Also to note, according to the Hawkeye miniseries, Clint was a huge inspiration for a very special young girl named Kate Bishop, who witnessed him during the 2012 New York battle. Another character to talk about is Nick Fury, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., played by Samuel L. Jackson, whom was in the Incredibles movies, the Star Wars prequel trilogy, DreamWorks Turbo, Tim Burton's Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, and he's in the new Paws of Fury movie, which was released in theaters today. After meeting and helping Carol Danvers back in 1995, Fury decided to form the Avengers initiative, where S.H.I.E.L.D. would seek out individuals with unique abilities and powers and record them in the Index to form a response team should any threat beyond the war-fighting capacity of conventional military forces appear. To me, while Fury is somewhat of an enigma, he is a master strategist and an astute judge of character. He uses these talents to great effect in his leadership. Next we come to Thor's adopted brother and the movie's main villain, Loki, played by Tom Hiddleston, whom was in The Pirate Fairy, Kong Skull Island, and Aardman's Early Man. In this movie, after previously being defeated by Thor, Loki found himself in Sanctuary, or the Chitaurian space, where he encountered the Other, who offered to serve under Thanos' command and gave him the Scepter. Loki was given command over the Chitaurian army in order to conquer Earth under the provision that Loki acquires the Tesseract for Thanos. Once he came to Earth, Loki managed to take possession of the Tesseract and used its power to open a wormhole above New York City and cause the Chitaurian invasion. To me, while I still don't take Loki pretty seriously as a villain due to him being the god of mischief, he's still a cunning, gifted, and extremely intelligent man. Plus, he's very clever when it comes to manipulating his victims. The last character I want to talk about is Eric Selvig, played by Stellan Skarsgård, whom was in the Mamma Mia movies, Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3, King Arthur, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and the 2015 Cinderella remake. For those who may not remember, Dr. Selvig was Jane Foster's mentor, and he became a very close friend of Thor's during his banishment from Asgard. However, in this movie, Dr. Selvig was recruited as a consultant for S.H.I.E.L.D. When Loki invaded Earth, Selvig was put under mind control, which temporarily damaged his mind and gave him a mental breakdown. In my opinion, while his role in this movie is not as big as he was previously, it's still a very important one. Plus, I think Selvig is a brilliant scientist, a deeply honest, and a loyal friend. Also, I must mention that Selvig and Jane were two of countless victims who were disintegrated by Thanos' snap. And now let's move on to my final words. Overall, The Avengers is such an amazing film. Though I still regret not seeing it in theaters 10 years ago, I think the action is epic, the teamwork involving these amazing heroes are awesome, the story is well written, and the cinematography and visual effects are spot on. Plus, I think this movie is a must-watch for every Marvel fan, and I think it still holds up after 10 years. Anyway, what's going to be my rating for this film? Well, I'm going to give it a full 100%. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to join me next time where I take a look at Thor's second solo movie in the MCU, which happens to take place in the Dark World. Mustang Power.